much longer I'm going to live. So, you know, I'm glad we're addressing that. And you don't. There's no real answer.
Nope.
You can just give an estimation.
Unless you're a certified psychic. Then you know.
You don't have anybody in your staff?
We've
that
been
is?
looking for people.
How long have you guys been together?
1998.
Oh, really? Long time then.
Yeah.
What brought you together?
I think just we wanted to form a group practice. I mean, it used to be one advisor, one staff, and then you kind of all have offices.
Yeah.
But we just kind of wanted to have a team approach at that time, which everybody's doing now. But back then, that was one of the first.
Hi, I'm Sandy Thompson, your host of Life Ahead here on PBS 39. Life Ahead always has a lot of questions involved with it, and we have a lot of answers for you here on this show. That's our intent, is to keep you informed. And because it's your show, we welcome you to give us a call here. Our topic tonight, we'll be talking about retirement and life expenses. What do you need in your life ahead? How do you know when you have enough? And what can you do to play as you get older? Well, we do have with us again, they were here in February, and by popular demand, can I say that, gentlemen? By
great.
popular demand, they're
We
back
like it.
again. We have with us here on the far end of the sofa, we have John Reimbold with us tonight, and Terry Anderson. Welcome back to you as well. Now, I know when you were here in February, you spent a lot of time discussing essentials that a person needs for retirement. We want to just review that a little bit and then go ahead and move to lifestyle expenses. What's lifestyle and how does that all relate? I'm going to start out with you, John, to help us out with that.
Well, again, what we talked about last time was the essential expenses. And
Yes.
those are the things that whether you're planning for retirement, you're in retirement, those are the things that you can't do without. So if everything goes to pot, we want to make sure that those are covered. We want to make sure that we have the income coming in to cover those expenses. And then we can start to talk about the lifestyle expenses. And as we talked before, going through expenses is not always a fun exercise, but it is necessary. When you're starting to look at retirement, we need to know what it takes to get by. So I was going to let Terry talk a little bit about the lifestyle expenses.
Oh, you must have a great lifestyle if you're going to share that with us, Terry.
I think the lifestyle expenses, I think the thing that is so intriguing about that is that, as John said, if you're looking and you can cover your essential expenses with Social Security, pensions, and
Yes.
guaranteed type income, that's a great place to be. So then you can start to look at lifestyle expenses, which really have a lot to do with the things that I like to think are fun in retirement.
So that's kind of like the analogy for lifestyle. Things that are
Right.
fun, that you don't
for
have
the
to
most
have
part,
for living.
yeah, you're talking about traveling, hobbies, spending time with grandkids, giving money to grandkids, maybe helping out family members if you can afford it. And those are your lifestyle type things. I think one thing that John and I were talking about as we were preparing for the show is that sometimes when you sit down and you talk to people about their expenses and differentiating between what's essential and what's lifestyle, that gets a little bit different for different people. You know, in other words, is having the ultimate cable TV package, is that lifestyle or is that essential?
Good point.
Is having the most up-to-date cell phone, is that lifestyle or is that essential?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can go back and forth on that as far as what truly is lifestyle.
You know, and one thing that I think that we run into is charitable giving or tithing. You know, to some people, if they had to cut back on that because, again, we went through the Great Recession and things got really bad, they would not feel bad about cutting back on it. But there's other people that absolutely not. That is an essential expense to them. That is part of what they want to make sure
that's what they do in their life. Yeah. So, in other words, then, when somebody comes to you for planning, for retirement, for financial planning, you know, first you set the basis of what they have to live the standard of life that they have been living and maybe want to live. And then we're going to go on to what is your lifestyle, or what you have beyond that that you can use for something else. Now, John, if somebody comes in, though, and you have to start settling on what you need for the essentials, okay? What about what Terry said? You know, if you need the best cell phone or TV or a new car, do you calculate differently for different people?
Well, what we actually do is we go through each item and we talk about it with the client, because again, it's not our plan, it's not what we want, it's what they want, and really start to go through what each and every item is, and would they need to have that. And again, a lot of those things are vacations and extra trips and whatnot, but there's a flip side of this now too. In the last 3 or 4 years, since the portfolio, okay, which is driving the income to produce or cover those expenses, has actually done better than we planned. So we're talking to people now and saying, why don't you were going to buy a car in 2 years anyway, maybe we should start taking a look at buying it now. Or you always wanted to take that trip to you know, Alaska, so now we can take that trip, so let's do it. And sometimes it's good for people to have somebody tell them it's okay to spend the money too.
Yeah, we were actually talking about that before the show, and I think that's one of the difficult things, is if you've worked years and years and years, you know, you've made a big point of trying to save as much money as you can for your retirement, and it's hard to get out of the habit of being extremely frugal or difficult for people to make that difference or understand that lifestyle is okay to spend money on, correct?
I think that's why breaking it down into essential expenses and lifestyle expenses is a good way to do it.
Okay.
Because if you truly know that your essential expenses are covered, so regardless, markets go up, markets go down, you're not relying on your portfolio as far as how well it does to cover those essentials.
We're looking at a graphic right now, and John, you mentioned some of these things that might be things that are in lifestyle expenses, like the vacations and hobbies and dining out, and I love this one, spoiling the grandkids. I bet you put that in there, Terry, because you were the one that mentioned that.
Yes, we were talking about that earlier, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, that's not a bad choice for what you would spend your extra money on. Legacy, can you go over that with me a little bit, John, your desired legacy?
Well, the legacy is really comes, well, typically at the end, in saying, is it important for me to leave money either to my children or to a charity? And again, it's a different answer for people. Some people that's very important, and for some people, it's not important at all. I just met with somebody last week and they said, I hope to die dead even. I don't want any money left because I've provided for my children's education.
Right.
I've helped my grandchildren a little bit, so I want to maximize my lifestyle.
Yeah, I think I read recently something about that. Your last check for $1 should be, you know, the end of your money, right?
That's kind of hard to pull off, though, sometimes, to know exactly.
The balance. You know, I want to talk about that, Terry. It is pretty hard to pull off because you don't know how long you're going to live. So if you're saying, okay, I've covered my essential expenses, and John and Terry told me that I have $20,000 a year to spend on grandkids or vacations or hobbies or anything that I want to, or maybe increase my cable package or whatever. And then you start thinking, well, how much longer will I live? How long will I have this opportunity for those extra expenses? How do we know how long we're going to live? I bet people ask you that all the time. What do you tell them, Terry?
Well, you can always go back to life expectancy. And of course, the actuaries out there, they know all about that. But when you look at life expectancies, that's mainly looking at that half the people are going to live to that age and half the people aren't going to live to that age.
We have a graphic here right now on the probability of retirement duration for 65 years or older. If you two would help explain that a little bit, Terry, go ahead and talk about
I think there's a
the
couple,
male thing here.
I think there's a couple of things that are significant about this graph when I looked at it, or this illustration. Is one thing, as I think you were alluding to, Sandy, is when it comes to life expectancy, the males are definitely the weaker part of the food chain there.
I love that you're explaining that and admitting that.
That may be the only area, but no, but men tend to have shorter life expectancies than women do.
And that would be something you'd build into their planning, their financial planning?
That can be built into there. You know, I always say if you don't believe that men live a shorter period of time, just take a trip to your local nursing home and see how many men are in there as compared to women.
Exactly.
I think, though, some key factors there are heredity, how long that your ancestors or your relatives have lived. Another thing is your lifestyle. You know, if you tend to have a fast and loose lifestyle, maybe that's not good for your life expectancy.
Yeah.
And then I think another thing that's involved there is your current health situation.
So, John, if somebody came into you and said, how much longer do you think that I'll live? How much longer do I need to plan for this much a year? Are those the kind of questions you'd ask them?
Well, here's how it works. The fact is that as we get older, we tend to do fewer things. So if I have a client in their 80s, they're probably not. Now, this is not true. I mean, there's plenty of them out there that do, but on average, they tend to do less travel. They tend to golf less.
Yeah.
So when we're putting these together and we're looking at where we want to spend our lifestyle money, a lot of people want to spend it early on. So we actually, in their analysis, we assume those first 10 or 15 years, we are going to spend X amount more, and we're budgeting for that in lifestyle. And then as we get older, we're going to cut back on that.
How about couples? I'm going to show that graph again if we can hear slide number 3. You've determined the male and the female possibilities for the duration of their lifetime, females living a little bit longer. Explain to me the couples aspect of it, Terry.
The couples aspect is that, as you can see, there's 25% of the people will live. And what that means is that at least one member of that couple is going to live to that age statistically.
So you need to plan for that financially.
You need to plan for that financially. And my feeling on this is, I mean, there's a couple different ways of looking at this. I think one way to look at it that I think has a lot of merit is always plan for, I guess, depending on how you would qualify it, the best or the worst, but always plan that you're going to live longer than you think you will.
Really?
Because what if you plan, you say, well, I've got terrible genetics, my whole family has died before age 70, and there's no way I'm going to live that long, and all of a sudden you find yourself at 80 and you didn't plan for it.
And you're out of money.
So I think, you know, with our financial planning software, it starts at 95
really?
as far as a life expectancy. And I think if somebody could where the numbers work that way, then you can be more confident as opposed to trying to cut it off and figure out a particular age that you're going to do. Because how does anybody know that? So I would say overplan rather than underplan.
Because the money's not going to go to waste at the end. If you still have money left, you know, you'll obviously have that willed to somebody. John, you look like you want to respond to that.
Well, I've said this many times. People don't come and have things analyzed because they're afraid they're going to run out of money in 5 years. I mean, you're not going to go talk to somebody and go, hey, can you help look at my essential and my lifestyle expenses because I'm concerned I'm going to run out of money in 5 years. They know they're not going to run out of money in 5 years. The concern is with inflation and life expectancy, what am I going to look like in 15, 20 years? And that's really, I think, where we bring value and say, hey, let's look down the road and see how things actually look.
Yeah, let's make it last.
You know, I want to step away from that just a minute to kind of get an overall view from you both. Why should somebody do financial planning for their future, whether it's 10 years or 20 more years, or whether it's for essentials or lifestyle? Can they just do it on their own, or how would a financial advisor like the two of you be able to be a benefit to them? Terry?
Well, I think that with the internet and with all these tools that are out there now, there's a possibility somebody could do a lot of the stuff on their own. I think the big question is, are they going to do that?
Right.
You know, an example, I know John and I run a business, and we have a coach. We have a planner that helps us sit down and talk about our business issues. Because as good as we feel that we are at giving financial advice and helping people with their own advice, the fact is John and I, in our day-to-day life, we're not going to sit down and talk about our business unless we have a coach that's going to focus us in on that. So I think a lot of being a financial advisor is, especially when you have a couple, is having that process of bringing two people together and having this conversation. Because a lot of times they're not going to have that conversation. And sometimes when I see people move into retirement, let's say they get let go from a company or they get a buyout, I really scratch my head and I think, how could they have factored all these things in as far as and being confident about that their retirement's gonna last and that they're not going to be just wringing their hands throughout retirement?
I think that's a good point, because a lot of people, especially if it's a surprise retirement or whatever, and maybe a natural retirement, it's kind of scary because you all of a sudden these questions come into your head. Do I have enough money to last the rest of my life? And because you've been busy working or living your life and with your family, maybe you have not done that planning yourself. John, jump in here with me on this in terms of why.
I think right now what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years is interest rates have gone down tremendously. So we start talking about guaranteed income and safety and CDs and government bonds. Well, they're just not generating the income that we need. So people are looking at, okay, great, it sounds good, you want to guarantee my essential expenses, but how are you going to do that? Well, there are ways of doing it. And there's also ways of saying, well, we might need to take a little more risk on our portfolio to meet those lifestyle expenses, okay? So part of what we do is not just going through expenses, but reviewing the portfolio and the income stream on a regular basis to make sure that, yes, it's in shape, we're not taking too much risk, we're not taking too little risk, and we customize that to what that client needs and what that person needs.
And that they have guaranteed income the way they have set up their portfolio.
For the essential.
Right, exactly. And obviously, as they get older, you want them to be less aggressive in their choices, correct?
Typically, yes. And, again, it goes back to what do we need to help pay the lifestyle expenses. So we might need to take a little more risk on the portfolio, even if somebody's a little older, in order to help let them cover those extra things that they want to do.
And we always want extra things. I mean, that's part of what you retire for, right?
Right.
To get to do what you didn't do before. Let's talk about withdrawal rate. How do you okay, so you've built up this pile of money. You have a nice, strong portfolio, but you have to figure out a rate of calculation here somehow and how you're going to withdraw it and how much each time. Help me out here, John, on this. And we do have a slide here to help us with that. In terms of withdrawal rates, how can we determine that, John?
I'm going to let Terry take this one.
Okay, Terry, go ahead. You're the expert on withdrawing money, apparently.
It's good to be an expert on something, So, well, when we're talking about withdrawal rate, I think the first thing we need to do is define that. What does that mean, withdrawal rate?
What does it mean?
So, when you look at the lifestyle expense, we've already talked about how you determine how much you need in lifestyle expenses. So, let's say you get that as an annual number, how much you need a year for your lifestyle expenses. So a withdrawal rate is just dividing that number into how much you have in your retirement portfolio.
Okay.
So when you're looking at withdrawal rates, the higher percentage that you need to withdraw out of your portfolio, the less likelihood that you're going to be successful in that. And what John was saying, if they can bring that up, the chart.
Slide number 4. Let's take a look at that chart once again there.
So with that chart, what that tells you is that if you're going to have a lower withdrawal rate, say in that 3 to 4% range, if you look down whether you're in cash, whether you're aggressive, whether you're moderately conservative, or any of those things, you're going to have pretty high probability of success. But where you get to where you need to take more money out of your portfolio than 3 or 4%, you see a move from the blue into the yellow, which means, if you know anything about yellow, that means caution. That doesn't mean that you can't make it. And then, referring to what John said, is when you look at that red, which is I would refer to as the danger zone there, when you look at the red, that's when it becomes more important to not be overly conservative, because you can go broke safely.
Yeah. Say that again. You can go broke safely.
You can go broke safely by just not having enough return on your portfolio.
Okay.
So when you get into the higher withdrawal rates, like John was referring to, then you have to decide whether you want to take more risk to try to accommodate the fact that you're taking a lot more money out of your portfolio.
And I'm sure that you have to balance this regularly. I mean, I would assume that you would be a good enough planner to know that maybe if you've gone in to see John and Terry and you've laid out your plan and you have your own personal charts and you have everything all planned, but maybe in 5 years you want to go back and reassess that. Is that something somebody would typically do, or what is a good time period?
Well, my opinion, I think you should look at it every year.
Every year, okay.
And one thing that ties into withdrawal rate is the tax ramifications.
And those keep changing.
It is a huge factor, depending upon what the portfolio. So you can talk about a portfolio, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, but you're saying, so what is it? Is it regular IRA? Is it Roth IRA? Is it non-IRA money? And then how does where I'm pulling the money from affect the taxation of everything else I'm doing, such as my pension and Social Security?
Right.
So sometimes what we're looking at, just to free up money so they can do more things, if we can minimize the taxation on their Social Security, then that might free up $200-300 a month that they wouldn't have otherwise. And that's just simply, that has nothing to do with investment performance. It has to do with where the money is coming out of their portfolio.
Yes, and that will regularly change as there are new statutes or new laws. The inheritance tax, simply here in Indiana, doing away with that. A lot of people may have thought they have to accommodate that inheritance tax at the end, and now they don't have to. We have one more slide I want to talk about here as well. We're going to talk about the importance of avoiding big losses. Certainly something most people are concerned about. If we talk about risk tolerance and relating that to planning for lifestyle expenses, how does this graph or the percentages apply to people? Terry?
Yeah, I think what's important about that is, especially because you had talked about how people get concerned about spending too much money and running out of money. Well, I think that sometimes when you look at a person's retirement, their biggest risk is taking too much risk. And I think the further you get away from a year like 2008 with the financial crisis, the more people forget about how losing money is painful. So what this slide is saying is...
I didn't forget. Go ahead.
Well, some people have longer memories, you know. So this shows that if you lose 50% on your portfolio, you've got to make, if you make 50%, you're only halfway back. So you need to get 100% return on your portfolio from that point to get back to where you started. Whereas if you lose 10%, you only have to gain 11% on your money to get back to ground zero. Again. So when we're putting portfolios together, we want to make sure that they meet a person's tolerance for risk, and we want to make sure that people know that if they're being aggressive, what that means. You know, because sometimes you get in an aggressive portfolio, people think, well, that's the way I want to invest because I can get the big returns.
Right.
And you say, well, you could lose money on this, and this is how much money you could lose. And generally the response is, well, I better not.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, from my experience, people in general are more reasonable as it relates to expectations on their portfolio. And you know, back in the 90s, when Fidelity Magellan was doing 25% a year, and people would come in the office and go, well, we only did 15% last year, you know.
We're unhappy.
Yeah, so we're unhappy. We can do better on our own. those days are kind of gone. And that chart, what we just showed, is because some people went through that, and it's hard for the market to go up 100% after it dropped 50, but that's what it needs to do for you to get your money back.
Exactly.
And so people are saying, I'm willing to not get the great big returns. I'd like good returns, but as long as I don't take one of those big hits, and we feel that way. That's exactly how we feel.
Right.
We're not going to say we're going to base your lifestyle goals on us getting you an average of 12% a year. That's not realistic for somebody in retirement right now, especially when interest rates are sitting at, CDs are paying 1%.
And when people retire and realize that their income stream is now no longer, except for maybe what they're getting for Social Security, then they probably tend to become a little more conservative and invest more conservative and want to make sure that they have some guaranteed income. I want to ask one final question that I'd like for both of you to share with our viewers here. As far as a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight in terms of essential expenses and lifestyle expenses, and again, focusing on your lifestyle, your extra things that you get. What are the 2 or 3 most important things that you want our viewers to go away with here tonight? John, I'll let you start.
I think that going through the process is not boring. It actually can be kind of fun. We've actually just recently contracted with someone that's going to help us to be better at doing that, and not just saying, I got to cut, but how can I find money? Because there are ways to look at your expenses and actually find money so I can do more things.
Give me an example.
Well, let's say we do look at the cable bill and we can cut
Okay.
that. Let's say we do look at certain insurances and we can cut that. I mean, there are areas where you can find money, and at $200 or $300 a month, that can let you take a nice vacation each year.
Right, because that'll add up month by month and year by year. Terry, chime in with us here in terms of what you think is important.
I think in this whole retirement process, to me, sometimes people get it backwards when they're retiring and maybe they have some money from a retirement plan, and they focus first on investing money and then on planning retirement. And I think the essential part of this whole thing is that you go through a process, you figure out where you stand, what you need, and what your money needs to do, and then you invest the money. You don't have to be in a hurry to invest the money. Make sure that money is doing what you need it to do.
And for
time
you.
and time again, I hear of people, well, we met with somebody and we did our investing. And then sometimes they're making decisions that can't be changed, and they're stuck with them for years because they didn't really go through the process and figure it out.
Right.
So that would be my key message for what we're talking about here.
I think that's very good advice, and I hope that all of you have listened very closely tonight. Again, I want to thank our guests that are financial planners and advisors that have been here this evening to help educate you and maybe save you some money. This is, of course, Terry Anderson and John Reimbold. And if you want to get in touch with them, we just invite you to give us a call here at PBS later on tonight or even tomorrow, and we can share that information. We have a great show for you next week as well. We're going to switch from finances to your health. We're going to talk about spine and neck pain. Maybe a lot of you are having that now here as you're working outside. Dr. David Lutz will be with us next Wednesday.